Yeah, not gonna lie. Kinda sick of having wired headphones. A little bit obnoxious, because it just gets caught on the chair constantly. I should stop even mucking about with that. My Stream Deck is gonna be on the way soon, so that'll be exciting, and hopefully I'll be able to sort of consolidate some of my my stuff a little bit. That'll be nice. That would be quite excellent. Draconian Discourse, where we last left off, we were watching this video. So yeah, I suppose I can just hop right in. I went too long yesterday. I should have cut it off. So hopefully I'll just be able to get through the rest of this without taking up too much time here. I wanna see if I can like sort of limit my what's the word? My length, my everything to like less than just the less than. Why are words not coming? What is happening? yeah, I think you get the point. I want to see if I can do like less than an hour or an hour and a half for the Draconian Discourse episodes like this. See if I can just sort of consolidate my thoughts a little bit quicker and easier, more concise. We want to be concise, that's what I'm saying. Anyhow.
Revealing clothing like shorts were seen as lewd, worthy of penalty.
Oh yeah, what is this?
That is innocent. You never hear about the conservatives talking about the family friend predator problem for some reason.
Oh right, I'm so happy to return to this.
I don't want my kids to know about those sinful clothes. Unironically, a random stranger in full latex and a puppet is literally more covered than many of the parents or conservatives saying that statement.
Yeah, I remember this bit, so let's see how he expounds upon that.
Revealing clothing like shorts were seen as lewd, worthy of penalty.
He didn't even leave that up for very long.
Like shorts.
The long history of wearing shorts, the 200-year evolution of knickerbockers, Daisy Dukes, and WWD's hot pants. Women increasingly began to wear shorts, especially for athletic purposes. These included Bermudas as well as early variations of short shorts. Adoption of these styles caused controversy in some parts of the U.S. In 1937, shorts became illegal in Yonkers, New York. Yonkers? What is Yonkers? That is... There's a New York State. That is this great name. That is a great name. Interesting. All right. And the town of Honesdale, Pennsylvania, banned shorts in 1938. Honesdale is a modest town, not a bathing beach, said a city official in Missouri's Mobility Monitor Index. 1937. Okay, interesting.
Were seen as lewd, worthy of penalties in the past. Then society got over it because clothes.
Okay, thank you, YouTube. Thank you, YouTube. My face when ad block is just non-existent. What is with this rubbish?
Nor the acknowledgement of its nature makes the predator. Predators being predators. Evil is just really...
What?
Were seen as lewd, worthy of penalties
skipped ahead.
in the past. Then society got over it because clothes nor the acknowledgement of its nature makes the predator. Predators being predators.
Clothes nor the acknowledgement of the clothes makes a predator a predator? Is that what he said?
The acknowledgement of its nature makes the predator. Predators being...
Like he's saying people got over modest modest clothing standards because it's all about the people who... Okay, so the argument is that it's okay to wear shorts because it's not the fault of the person wearing the shorts that somebody is attracted to see the extra skin being revealed. It's, you know, it's the fault of the person who may act on that, on seeing that. I think that makes sense. Where sort of my libertarian view would be that, you know, it's not within the legitimate purview of government to really regulate anything that a person wears in any particular area. In, you know, the limiting idea to that being that you know, you don't want your children exposed to like everything Where's he going with it?
Being predators make the predator. No one is a predator solely due to a puphood, so using that as a sign of evil is just really silly, which is why progressive cons allow puphoods to roam free.
Maybe my brain is just a little bit slow right now. I need to run that back.
Make the predator. No one is a predator solely due to a puphood, so using that as a sign of evil is just really...
No one is a predator due to wearing a puphood or due to seeing a puphood? Is that what he's saying? Because sure, like, you know, the only case that you actually are a predator is if you actually victimize, you know, do something that is predatory. But the entire idea is that we should not be showing children these things. It's not inherently predatory to wear something that is sexualized, but it is inherently predatory to wear something that is sexualized in front of a child and subjecting that child and exposing that child to that inherently sexualized thing. Like, that's kind of the crux of the entire discussion here. Like, it's like they'll cons allow puphoods to roam free for this reason. It's just like, okay, well, it depends on, do they still have a dress code though? Like, is there certain areas where the dress code is far more lenient because this area in particular is, you know, not exposed to, what am I saying? This area is 18 plus, and then this area is all ages. So in this area you can't wear these things, but in this area it's fine. Like, you know, you do have to draw a line somewhere. Totally agree. Well, yes, thank you, and welcome.
Silly, which is why progressive cons allow puphoods to roam free. The fear-mongering by conservatives about those folks who tend to be way more aware of consent and enforcing said consent rules is just a bit odd.
Tend to be way more aware of consent and enforcing consent rules. I don't know about that. Because I've definitely seen things where there's a lot of exposing of, you know, things of an explicit sexual nature, and there are children around, and that is actually praised in sort of quote-unquote progressive situations. Like, so long as we can actually draw the line, then it's, I think that would be perfectly acceptable. If we're going to say this is a you know, a private event, and we're just going to have, you know, like burlesque, or we're going to have there's a bit of a glare on the camera. Crap, where's my no, this is going to bother me. Goodness. But like the sort of idea that we can never like, I don't know, it seems to be a strange thing in sort of the progressive circles, where it's just like, well, my perception is that this is a total, like, we have all of these rules, and we're way more aware of these rules and the consent and everything, and it's just like, well, but then you actively ignore the situations where that's not the case. Like, what I'm wondering is you know, point to some examples where it's just like, this is an example of where things are done well, like, because it's difficult, and it actually muddies the water significantly when you're talking about it in these general terms, where it's just like, well, the progressives are really good at understanding consent, and the sort of conservatives are not good at understanding consent, and so that is, like, you're speaking in these broad general terms, whereas if you actually got granular, where you're like, well, so this con in particular allowed puphoods, but it didn't, it still had to adhere to a certain dress code. So if you had a certain amount of skin that was showing, you know, around the whatever areas, then, or if you were wearing more of a, you know, full latex sexualized or whatever it was, then you weren't actually allowed to, we weren't going to admit you to the con. Whereas if you, and if we saw you in, then we would be kicking you out. Like, whereas if you were wearing more, what's the word, like you know, if you were wearing the pup hood, but the rest of it wasn't actually sexualized and there wasn't any sort of a sexualized behavior or anything that was going on, then you were, you know, fully admitted. Or maybe in this area that was acceptable, but in this area it wasn't, like whatever it was. But, you know, you would have to point to some examples here where, you know, okay, in this case, there was actually bad conduct and this is something that I would condemn. And then in this case, there's something that I would condemn, like whatever it is. Or this is something praiseworthy. This is something that is worthy of condemnation. Like, I feel like that would help a lot in actually drawing some examples. But like the only examples that were here, at least in the comments, were like free for all, which is saying like, you know, I condemn, you know, this sort of thing as a conservative, but like I don't know, like there's just not a lot of examples to actually draw off of with this, and I feel like it's not being specific enough, because I mean, this is sort of the big issue with this video overall, and a lot of the attitude of this individual overall, is that he's really just taking this general idea of these general things and, you know, not really being specific at all, and just trying to defend a general sense that he's got. And it's like, you would actually want to be more specific if you want to be productive about this. Like it should be just present what your perception of conservatism is, which I think he's done, and I mean it's wrong, but you know, he's presented that, but then he hasn't actually explained how this is what I actually think, where it's just like, well, lots of conservatives say that this would be a problem, and then this is actually the way that we deal with it, rather than, instead of just being, well, the progressive cons, the progressive this is effective in XYZ. It's just like, specifics please. Like it just seems like this general sort of a attempting to, what's the word, it's just like a general confirmation bias deal of just progressive good, conservative bad, and so I'm just going to take what my perception is and then apply it to that, because it's just like, I mean, there are examples that I can point to where it's like, you know, you take the drag sort of debate where, you know, drag inherently in and of itself with the makeup styles and whatnot isn't inherently sexual, but there are certainly situations where that is sexualized, and then you can actually see that there are parents bringing children to this show, and the show actually is not being intentional about the way that it's like explicitly saying, actually, if you bring a child in here, we're going to kick you and the child out because this is an explicit situation. There are many people within that sort of a debate that, you know, if I were in sort of the more of the drag community or the drag, like whatever, if that was sort of my situation, I'd be like, yeah, that's wrong, and I denounce that, and if it were my event, then I wouldn't be running it that way. And the events that I go to don't actually allow children in it if that is actually what we are doing in that event. Or, you know, if there is a child event, then we don't, child-friendly event or whatever, then we actually are wearing like fully, what do you call it, like modest clothing, and there's no like exposure to XYZ. Like, I don't know, if that was sort of the position that was being taken, that would be a lot more easy and reasonable for people to get along with. So I don't know, it's more like an oversweep generalization. Yeah, it's like, I'd rather get like granular with some specific examples, because I'm not as familiar with like actual like con situations, so I'm not, it's like I want to just sort of like, you know, point to something to me that you say, well, this is an example of this thing going too far, and this is an example of this not going far enough or something. Like, I don't know, like just point to something. Also, this has been bothering me a lot. These textures do not have like, you know, PNG, they don't have any alpha, they don't have transparency, and so the textures are still showing the bits that are supposed to be transparent. It's like just bothering me, because it's not supposed to be that way. As someone who's done a lot of modeling and texturing, like, it's probably the engine itself that doesn't know how to interpret these textures in the proper way, but like, oh, it just bothers me.
So furry conservatives crying about the innocence of children don't actually seem to care about what actually would help a child. And in fact, I would personally say their bigotry rubbing off onto their kin is way more of an immediate issue that needs...
What? I've got to run that back.
Crying
What?
about the innocence of children don't actually seem to care about what actually would help a child.
See, I mean, once again, this is very what's the word? Very there's no benefit of the doubt here whatsoever. I think I was going to mention this yesterday when I was responding to the beginning of the video, but there was a video that I'd looked up, and I'd sort of been thinking about this because it kind of struck me as really interesting that the vast majority of the time when I hear sort of people talking from the left or progressive or whatever you want to call it, any time that a conservative sort of does anything that is outside of the line of what they purport their principles to be, then the left clowns on it, just like, oh yeah, you don't even practice what you preach, whatever. But it was really interesting. So there was like several years ago where Alex Jones was on like Joe Rogan or something like that, and they saw, I don't even know what it was, or it was on his show, and there was a camera that had pointed down onto his phone, and on the phone was very clearly, like you could see like titles, or it was on his computer, I don't remember, but there were clearly titles that indicated that they were like, it was trans porn. And so everybody was clowning on him, where it was just like, well, you know, you seem to be sort of against it in these ways, but you also seem to enjoy watching it. So like, what is going on with that? And I mean, later on, he met up with Blair White, and they took a picture together. They like did like the axe throwing or something like that. I don't remember. And then people were saying, oh, maybe, I think that my brain just remembered a different situation, but people were saying, it's just like, oh yeah, he definitely boned her. But like, you know, it's an interesting situation, because most people were clowning on him for it. But I looked that up because I'd heard like on a random podcast or something like that, where it's just like Alex Jones watches trans porn. That's funny. And I looked up this, I just looked it up and wanted to see what people were saying about it. And I looked up, it was just some random show that I came across, that, you know, it was somebody who was on the American left, a Democrat, most likely, it seemed like, by the way he was talking. And he actually, what he said was that, you know, it's not exactly fair to clown on him for this, because we can actually give him the benefit of the doubt here and assume that he actually does believe what he believes, because, you know, it's and that there should actually be some compassion for somebody who believes that in a principle and then fails to live up to that principle. It's just like, he could genuinely believe that, you know, being trans is wrong, or being bisexual is wrong, but he still looks this up and gets off to it because it's actually really difficult for him to live up to sort of that standard, because, you know, the power of the flesh over the will of the individual type of a situation. I was like, that's actually really interesting that there is that benefit of the doubt being presented in this situation, and that's something that I really have not heard from very many on the American left. Like, it's just not really happened too often. Where I'd like to see more of that, where, you know, you can see people with which you disagree and you can discuss with them without sort of, you know, depriving them of their sort of an equal footing, where it's just like, well, no, I believe that you believe what you are saying. I believe you're wrong, but I can actually give you that sort of a benefit of the doubt anyway. Like, I think we need to be able to return to that more often, especially when it comes to difficult topics like this. But, you know, to sort that back into this video, like, it's definitely not coming from that angle where it's just like, oh, they're just pretending to care about these things, but actually it's like, you know, can we actually, it's very, very difficult to have a civil conversation, a civil debate, and it's ironic because he's going to constantly say, like, this is a serious question, this is a genuine question, I'm really asking this question, but it's clearly being asked in bad faith, because you're not actually coming to the table saying that, okay, I believe that you are genuine in your beliefs. He's not actually admitting that. He's saying outright, I just think you're cynical, I just think you're pretending to do these because you are a bigot. And you can't really have a conversation that way. Like, you can't start a conversation or frame a conversation with that being your starting point. It's just not really fair. Let me run back what he said.
Way more aware of consent and enforcing said consent rules is just a bit odd. So furry conservatives crying about the...
That's a weird, a really weird line to sort of draw, because like if you knew anything about conservatism, and I know he doesn't because of what he said, but like if you knew anything about conservatism, you'd actually understand that like it's all about consent. Like significant amount of it is due to consent, because like it's like, you know, that's an aspect of marriage where it's just like, actually I'm not going to have sex until marriage, and you know that children are not actually capable of consent, and that is why you can't actually expose them to sexually explicit material before they become of age, because you know it's kind of the amygdala is the only thing that's working in the brain, and the prefrontal cortex is highly underdeveloped, and so it hasn't kind of kicked in, and they really just don't understand and can't comprehend a significant amount of what they are being sort of exposed and subjected to. So we should keep them away from that. It's just like, okay, tell me with a straight face that conservatives don't understand anything about consent and enforcing rules of consent, because I don't know where you're drawing that from. It just doesn't make sense.
Innocence of children don't actually seem to care about what actually would help a child. And
why wouldn't we care about what would help a child? As in, help a child not get exposed to sexually explicit content. Like, what makes you think that we don't actually want to help children in that way? That is actually what we are trying to do. We just have a different idea on what the solutions are to that, and maybe we have a bias against something that leans in a particular direction, where, you know, the hood in and of itself is meant to be something that is sexually explicit, and not actually the context that the hood exists in, and the rest of the outfit, and how that outfit actually is integrated into how this person is expressing themselves. Like, you know, you could absolutely say, well, it does seem that conservatives are a little bit heavy-handed in trying to ensure that people don't wear these articles of clothing due to this perception that all of these articles of clothing are inherently sexual, when actually they're not all that inherently sexual. Like, I think that would be a perfectly fine criticism to make, that it's just like, you know, I don't think we have to go anywhere near as heavy-handed with this, but I would also agree from the starting point. I think someone like this would do to seriously like take a philosophy class or something, like read about how people discuss these types of issues, how people discuss philosophical issues, where it's like you kind of have to, like the sort of philosophical, like the logical format, whatever you call this stuff. Oh gosh, that's a little bit more intense than I was going for. Is it logical form? Yeah, it's like this type of a thing where it's like number one, number two, number three, and it's like, you know, you wait. This is a Diogenes argument right here. You see this? All men are human. Hillary Clinton is human. Hillary Clinton is a man. I love that. That is a Diogenes argument. Or no, it's what Diogenes would say in response to the argument that I forget, it was Plato would say that it's just like, well, a man has to be bipedal, featherless, and have two legs, and then Diogenes comes in with a shaved chicken and sets it down and says, this is a man. Like that's the Diogenes sort of thing there. But yeah, sort of just taking it from like, okay, we have to start from number one. Okay, premise number one is that children should not be subjected to sexual material. It's like, okay, can we agree on that? All right, we both agree on that. You know, so where do we go from there? We agree that it is a problem to expose children to sexually explicit content, but what is the solution? And for you know, conservatives, the solution would be, well, anything that sort of is a gateway into any sort of that type of a thing, maybe. Anything that is a sort of tangential to that experience, where, you know, it's BDSM or sort of just pup hoods, like that sort of a situation where it's like, well, the pup hoods are actually tangentially related to a fetishistic sort of a content, and so children should not be subjected to that, because it might actually lead them to ask more questions of I don't know, but like that sort of shouldn't be normalized, and I wouldn't even I wouldn't really agree with that, because inherently, like, the assortment of particles in the pup hood in and of itself isn't inherently sexual, in the same way that a fursuit isn't inherently sexual. Goodness sake. but it can be sexualized. It's just, you know, is it sexualized inherently in and of itself in the context that we're seeing it in? And what are the solutions to that? And how do we enforce the solutions to that in the context of a convention? Like, that would be a far more productive discussion than to sort of just assume who you are speaking with, no matter what. And it's like, okay, do you actually want to have a conversation about this? Are you going to like bring people on your stream? Are you going to actually discuss with people on stream? Like, are you going to like what is the situation we're going to have here? Because this is a little bit, it's just sort of diluted nonsense in this case, where it's like, I don't think you've actually spoken on anything really with this. There's no depth to any of this except your personal perspective, your perception of what other people have to say, and I don't really get it. Like, it's like you haven't put two and two together here and actually made a reasonable case for what you're arguing for, which is that conservatives should not be allowed in the furry fandom effectively. I mean, the title is that they do nothing for the furry fandom, but obviously the context that I took this from was from a tweet that he said that we need to gatekeep conservatives from the furry fandom effectively. And then other people in the comments saying it's just like, call it anthro, but, don't call it, don't call it furry because that's our thing. And it's just like, no, so long as you are, representing yourself as an anthropomorphic character, then I don't think we should be gatekeeping furry from any. It's sort of the same thing that happens within Christianity, where they say like, Mormons aren't Christians, and it's just like, well, okay, what is the definition of a Christian? Is a Christian someone who believes in Christ? Because you can absolutely say that Mormons aren't evangelical, because they're not, because Mormons are actually under a different category of Christianity. They're under the category of restorationists, and restorationism is a different sect than evangelicalism. But like, that sort of split in the tree, if they both believe in Christ, we could say, yes, they both believe in Christ. It's not evangelical Christianity, it's restorationism, that brand of Christianity, but they're still both Christians definitionally, because they believe that Christ is the Messiah. If there's another sort of a sect that says actually there's no Trinity, Unitarian versus a Trinitarian, but they both still believe in Christ and God, so they're still Christians. Like, why are we trying to sort of gatekeep from something where inherently in and of itself a furry is somebody who enjoys sort of anthropomorphic character styles and will use a persona and have like these, like, why do we have to end up like gatekeeping these terms simply because we disagree on people? We disagree with people within that sect on, I don't know, just general ideological terms. Why do we have to gatekeep based off of that? Just because we don't like dealing with the fact that other people disagree with us? It's not very productive. Unfortunately, the majority of discussions about this type of points on media are there to be used politically, not to find a real useful outcome, or as you said, to get the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, no, it's true. People don't actually want to have nuanced discussions and actually come to conclusions and actually hear each other. And that's why I say when I'd responded to some of the comments that it was like, why would you assume that I haven't spoken to conservatives? It's like, well, because you don't actually understand what conservatives think. You are assuming what they think. So it's not actually unsafe for me to assume that you don't know how conservatives think, because you clearly don't have an accurate perception of what conservatism even is. Like, what, but he's like, well, I've spoken with conservatives. It's like, all right, but you haven't listened to them because you still don't understand what conservatism really is. And you may have discussed this with people who identify as conservatives, but they themselves might not actually understand what conservatism is. Like, this can happen in plenty of situations where people will use the label, but actually not actually, they're not representative of sort of the heart of the sort of the movement or whatever that they are actually identifying to. So like, let's actually have a concrete definition of of who we are talking about and deal with this as individuals, where we say, well, I'm a conservative, and then you say, okay, define your term. What is conservatism? And for me, obviously, that would be a very complicated thing, because it's just like, well, there's actually a lot that kind of that kind of enumerates itself into that, because it's not just any one thing. And, you know, you might look at the word in and of itself and say, well, okay, definitionally, if you look at the word root, then it just means conserving things. And it's just like, well, no, conserving status quo in and of itself is not really what I stand for. So my definition would be something far more complicated, like et cetera, that I've laid out multiple times in the previous stream. But, you know, progressivism, what is that? Is it just like, you know, trying to advance progress, or is that also a very complicated definition that you would characterize by several different sort of tenets of that sort of characterization? Like it would be far more productive to be able to drop the labels and say, okay, whatever you want to say, I just want to understand what you think. Because sometimes you might say, well, yeah, I'm a conservative, and then they'll just assume a billion things based off of that stance. And then it's like, okay, but, you know, maybe you should actually do some research on what generally conservatives think before you just assume a billion things that they supposedly think based off of your perception of things. Like, it'd just be far more productive if we could just have that conversation without it turning into this.
In fact, I would personally say their bigotry rubbing off onto their kin is way more of an immediate issue that needs corrected.
Their bigotry rubbing off to their kid is way more of an issue than protecting them from being subjective to sexualized content. Like, you know, he's saying actually there's not as much of a risk there, because there's not as much that they're being subjected to, and the things that they're saying that they're being subjected to are actually not going to be damaging them in the long run. I think that's sort of a sound, if not valid, argument. Right? Is that I always confuse the two. I can't keep them straight in my mind, but you know, it's like, all right, I'll accept that sort of idea. But again, first of all, bigotry is something that people perceive a lot of the time. When if you actually are going by the definition of bigotry, then you don't get to pick and choose who you are bigoted against. You know, bigotry is just this sort of a generalized blanket term, meaning that you dislike people of a certain out-group. I mean, it's basically just one simple and actually quite old word that means that it's a simple stand-in for out-group homogeneity bias. This it's not exactly a phenomenon. It's just human psychology, that when there is a group that you are not in and it's an out-group, and you look outwards, you look at that group and you don't understand how they work, and you perceive them to be homogenous, but your in-group you perceive to be heterogeneous and more diverse, is because you know everybody in your in-group and you don't know the people in the out-group. And so your brain needs to simplify the people in the out-group, because otherwise you'd have to learn the names of every single person in that out-group and actually listen to them, and actually, you know, rather than, as I say, drawing the box and saying that doesn't fit inside the box and therefore I have to reject it, which is a confirmation bias, then you'd actually have to change the box in and of itself and get a more nuanced box, more nuanced position of understanding, okay, conservatives don't actually just hate people, they just have these principles that they believe in that I don't actually really agree with. Like, that is the conclusion that everybody should be able to come to, which is, you know, that, you know, progressives have these blind spots, and you know, the left has these blind spots and the right has these blind spots, but we're all trying to get to the same goal, which is to maximize pleasure and minimize pain, I suppose, in sort of the most broad philosophical terms. But we don't actually want to grant people that, you know, that benefit of the doubt. We don't want to grant people that sort of credibility that actually you do want people to be good, you know, in good positions and happy and whatnot. Because this is the interesting thing, is that actually there's a lot to learn. Because I wouldn't be making a video like leftists do nothing for the furry fandom, progressives do nothing for the furry fandom. I wouldn't be saying something like that, because you are contributing to this demographic. You're contributing to everything that everybody's sort of doing here, and you're contributing to it with speech and with content and with ideas that you spread, and by having discussions, and by you know, investing money into situations, and by doing all sorts of things you are actually contributing a significant amount. And it's just like, well, do they do nothing? Well, I don't know. They show up and they pay money to make it into cons, and those cons then have additional revenues that they can invest into future cons, into growing the cons for the next year, into making conditions greater for the next event that's going to go on. Or conservatives still can do art. They can still make art, and they can still make money making art, and you can pay them for that, and you both benefit through that because capitalism. Like you can. But I don't understand why you would want to alienate a significant portion of people within the fandom just because you disagree with their risk assessment on general ideological terms. Like, I wouldn't want to do that for progressives necessarily, because they're still like people. They still have moral worth, and they still have something to contribute to life. And so it's just like, okay, if you don't think conservatives can be in the furry fandom, what else do you think that they shouldn't be admitted into? Do you not want them to be your neighbors? Do you not want them to be your where does this principle get itself limited to? Do you not want them to be your fellow citizens? Do you want them to be in a separate country? Do you want them to be like, what is actually the end goal here? Because you seem to not be able to funnily enough be tolerant of people who disagree with your ideas, to only the degree of just having it's just a simple disagreement about what to do from a consequentialist standpoint, where it's just like, okay, I think that it's a good idea to do this so we can prevent this bad thing from happening. And you say, actually, I don't think the consequences would play out in the way that you say them to be. That is not a discussion that we're having right now. What the discussion that we're having is that, I'm not tolerant of your views because your views are bigoted. And it's just like, right, does that mean that you don't actually want to coexist with me? Do you want to be on the same planet as me? Because there are plenty of people who I think readily admit to this, where they will go out and say something along the lines of like, I'm so sad that I live on the same planet as these people, which is like, zoinks. But like, why can't we actually just have a discussion about these things rather than just sort of trying to castigate an entire demographic of people and reject them from the entire demographic in and of a whole, from the entire community as a whole? Like, can we maybe just share ideas and then the best ideas can win? Can we not do that? Do conservatives have anything to contribute in a way that is productive? Do you want to sit down and talk with them? Like, do you want to come on stream with me? Do you want to talk with me? Do you want to, what is sort of the end goal here? Because if you reject them from one sort of facet of society, do you want to reject them from more than that? Like, I want to know what the end goal here is.
Because guess what happens when a kid repeats their parents' racist statements? They harm other kids, or get in trouble and lose academic time or future opportunities, or...
Oh, right. But I think they eventually will learn. Like, there was again, when you look at the American left as a collective, this concept doesn't pan out very well. This principle doesn't pan out very well as a whole, where it's just like, well, actually, you like to pick and choose what you use your principles for, and you will make false equivalencies constantly and say that, oh no, that doesn't actually count. But like, when you actually discuss this sort of a thing, I've got a brief story about this. My mother was a substitute teacher effectively, and she was just teaching this class, and she went to Jerusalem, which is the capital of Israel, for anybody who didn't realize. But she went to Jerusalem at a certain time previously in her life, and so, because of the Christian beliefs and that Judaism is sort of the root of Christianity, then, she had a Star of David around her neck, and it's just sort of this symbol of remembering a lot of sort of the roots of where Christianity came from. And there was a child in that class that noticed at whatever point that she was wearing that Star of David as a necklace, and he had indicated the symbol, and he had said something rather cross about it. Like he said something about it being like, I don't know. He said something that was anti-Semitic, just inherently. It was just like, oh yeah, you got the Jew symbol or whatever it was. Like I don't know if he said a slur or whatever it was, but she had just kind of looked at him quizzically, and her entire sort of perspective on that was just like, you just have absolutely no clue what you're talking about, do you? Like you just like are just looking at something that is, you know, just thousands of years of history and culture and all of that, and it's dumbed down to just a simple, maybe just one word, maybe just one sort of a quote unquote hateful statement. And it's just, you just sort of look at that as you, and I think it's a good example. You look at that child and you're just like, what? Like, do you know anything about what you just spoke on? Like, and so when you sort of take that perspective, where what would be the acceptable thing to do with that child, and this is a concept that I laid out previously as well, is that, but what do you do with that child? Do you punish them for saying that type of a thing, or do you simply exact you voice a disagreement as a psychological punishment in and of itself that says, hey, do you know that like Jews are also people? Like, that's actually a very, very hateful thing for you to say. That's a very rude thing for you to say. Like, you're saying that it doesn't matter that these people are people. It's because they come from this culture, that they come from this race, religion, creed, that they're no longer people and they don't deserve like any sort of a, you know, dignity anymore. They don't deserve any sort of a inherent respect at all, just because they're part of this group. Like, what is wrong with you? Like, if you sort of exact that type of thing, or maybe, you know, with a child, you would set them down and you'd say, so what religion do you believe in? What do you you know, purport to be true? And they'll say whatever it was, and it's just like, okay, so what if I said to you that I was going to make up a word that meant you and all of your people and all of your family and all of them just deserve to die, and I'm going to, you know, sort of spew that hateful rhetoric at you, type of a situation. Like, how would you feel about that? It's like, well, I wouldn't feel very good about that. And it's just like, well, that's what you just did to the Jews when you said that type of thing. Like, you make the child think about that. You actually give them that lesson where they're like, oh, so you're saying that they're people as well. Like, you know, you want to actually guide people through that. It's harder to do with adults, because adults actually, due to the fact that the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex begin to kind of work together, which is actually really bad news, because the amygdala will record traumas all the time. And so then, you know, either the prefrontal cortex can fight against the amygdala and say, actually, that trauma, we need to categorize that separately from actually what is literally happening, because just because there was some person being rude to us doesn't mean that that person hated us for being what we are, that they're being hateful. Maybe it's just because that person in particular is an asshole. Like, that sort of idea, rather than having this knee-jerk reaction of like, yeah, the entire reason why they behave that way is clearly because that person is hateful and bigoted towards people in my group. Like, that, we should really be pitting the prefrontal cortex against the amygdala in many cases, because that actually helps us to actually pass out these situations, because, you know, you need that opposition in your mind, otherwise you're going to be out of balance. And that's what I think actually the difference between an animalistic tendency and a, you know, being a being with reason, who's blessed with reason and using reason is, you know, you're not using the reason to back up this emotional motivation. You're using the reason to actually hamper the emotional motivation, or at least to justify the emotional motivation in a way that doesn't actually just reject something that doesn't justify the emotional motivation. Like, this is something that we're all susceptible to, but it's important to be able to have that sort of a discussion where it's not about just trying to, you know, as I say, castigate people who disagree. Like, what happens when you just oust people constantly whenever they have a disagreement what ends up happening is everybody who disagrees with you is eventually going to feel like they are disconnected, like they've been forgotten, like the rest of society has neglected them, they've cast them out, and they're going to gather. And they all gather together and they bring all of the ideas that you think are bad ideas, that you don't like, that they're going to gather all those ideas together, and then they're going to band together, and they're going to use some sort of a power to actually enact those ideas in some sort of a way. And so that might turn into Charlottesville, that might turn into whatever it might turn into. But I think for all we know that it's just going to end up turning into sort of, you know, relegated to a specific subset of society in the furry fandom. It's going to end up being kind of a backlash, a big wave. And people just are deranged about these types of things. It's just like, you actually don't understand how you got Trump. Like, the entire reason that you got Trump is because people were sick of being told that they were like racist, sexist, bigot, homophobes, and they were going to say, okay, here's a middle finger to you because this is what you deserve after, you know, years and years and years of saying all of these things to me and castigating me like this and maligning me. It's like, all right, whatever. If you want to treat me that way, then you can treat me that way. Like, you know, have fun with this. It's just going to throw up the middle finger, and we're not putting up with it anymore, because you actually can't have a discussion at that point. Because it was happening with Mitt Romney, who is like, you know, just as it said, the most milquetoast person pretty much ever to see the Republican nomination, and they were calling him racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe, like talking about him cutting a gay kid's hair or whatever. Like they were maligning him, and he was a pretty good representative. And it's just like, okay, you've cried wolf so many times, I don't really believe you when you say it about someone who, whatever it is, where it's like, you know. But I would say that Trump is very boorish, and he's, you know, not a good representative of conservatism, but he is a useful tool, and you're going to cry and wail about it, but you will be crying and wailing no matter who it was. So I don't really care at this point. Like, that's kind of the entire perspective from that side of the aisle. It's like, what do you actually expect to happen? Are people who you reject, who say conservatives do nothing for the furry fandom? I don't want to have discussions with conservatives, and I don't even know what they believe, and I'm going to demonstrate that I don't even know what they believe. Do you think this is going to help win conservatives to your side, or do you think this is just going to make conservatives more quiet? Because this is one of the things that was said in sort of that Twitter thread that he was involved in, where he's just like, I don't know what you're talking about holding your tongue. It's just like, well, when you actually make an example of everybody, and you know, you bully one person out of existence, or, you know, out of the public square, or you put them in the boo box, like on Twitter. When you do that enough times, eventually people are just like, I'm sick of it, because you're going to do it to me anyway. You've picked on people who are frankly quite innocent of any wrongdoing. You've cried wolf so many times that I don't care anymore. I just legitimately don't care at this point, that you were going to do it regardless. You're going to do it anyway, and I'm sick of actually holding my tongue, and I'm not going to be cowardly about it anymore. That's what people are going to say about it. That's the way that people's views are going to turn against you if you don't actually get your crap together, and start sitting down and talking out these ideas with people in a respectful way. You can't continue to malign people and just expect them to comply. And that's what that is. That's what the other commenter had talked about, when he's just like, no, we're not going to accept your boot anymore. We're not going to be taken up by your jackboots and by your authoritarian tendencies. We're not actually going to tolerate that anymore, because we're sick of it. Like, and you're just like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know why, but what you're talking about with you didn't used to comply, did you? It's just like, okay, but how many people now are actually speaking out about these things and sick of the constant abuse by people? How many people? And what they say is like, oh yeah, Twitter's just horrible. It was just ruined by Elon Musk. It's like, no, it was horrible before. Now just right-wingers get to speak. And that's what's so horrible. That's what's so horrible about it in the eyes of these people, is that we don't actually want right-wingers to speak. We don't want their ideas to be propagated, because we don't actually have a way to discuss with them in a polite way. And it's like, okay, this is the way that things are going to be going when we lose this much that we have in common with each other. When the social fabric decays to this degree, we're going to start not being able to coexist with each other. So what does this take? This takes, hey, you need to be able to sit down and talk. And if you don't want to be able to sit down and talk, then, like, I don't know, like, where do we go from here? Can we not coexist, or can we coexist? Because coexisting actually involves freedom of speech, and actually involves civil discussions. And you don't want to turn down that dial. You don't want to turn the dial down. You don't want to turn the volume down on this. Not volume, the heat down on this.
Racist statements. They harm other kids, or get in trouble and lose academic time, or future opportunities.
And what do you think that's going to teach them? Because if you simply said to that kid, well, that's actually very rude and boorish and kind of outside of the realm of acceptable speech, and I don't, or this is outside of the Overton window type of a deal, or this is sort of bordering on outside the Overton window, maybe if you actually sat down and had these discussions with them, then you would be able to convince them against their ways. But you know, if you actually deny people of, if you attempt to ruin people's lives over the things that they say, especially when you say, as you say, that, hey, you taught these kids bigotry, and now they're going to exact the consequences of those bigotry. Maybe you actually shouldn't give them consequences for bigotry that they actually didn't understand that they had a part in whatsoever. Like, you know, maybe you shouldn't punish people for being bigoted. Maybe you should actually convince people to not be bigoted anymore. And you don't have faith in your own abilities to convince people against that. But frankly, I do, because the ability for people to actually have these discussions and to have rational, calm discussions with people really helps to ground people, because they start to realize, oh wait, maybe I was out of line when I was saying this, because I'm talking with somebody who is part of this group and they're not so bad. But what do you actually do when you punish people for that? You actually validate their position to themselves. They say, well, yeah, well, clearly I must be right, because they have to resort to evil tactics of trying to ruin my life in order to get their agenda to be followed. Clearly their agenda in and of itself is evil and wrong, and they don't actually have a way to back it up, because they actually can't just have this open discussion rationally with me, and they can't just sit down and try to change my mind. Like, why can't we do that at this point? Why would you want to punish somebody for something that you admit and that you say they did not choose to believe? They were just brainwashed into being bigoted by bigoted people, being their parents or being their community or whatever. So why do you want to punish them for that? But you still blame that on them. Well, you shouldn't have taught them those bigoted things. And it's just like, oh, but maybe you shouldn't have punished them for those bigoted things. Maybe you should have sat down with them and convinced them that it was not okay to believe those things. That actually there's a better, more nuanced position that you can get to that can still be respectful of other people. And that maybe you should have empathy for other people. Like, maybe you could sit down with these people and discuss with them and say, hey, I'm part of the group that you think is so bad. I want you to know that I am not so bad, and that I'm actually a better representative of this group than you think. Do you do this with people who just say, oh yeah, those furries? Like do you actually sit down with those people and say, oh, all right, like, you know, like we're still like people. We still have, like, you know, rights. We still have, like, these, you know, why do your values end where we begin, right? Why does the American flag not stand for us? Why does, you know, whatever you want to say to them, why do you not want to have those discussions with people and change those minds? It's because you don't think you can change those minds. And I think if you don't have the faith that you can change minds, then I think you've kind of created a self-fulfilling prophecy for yourself there. You got to be able to do it. You got to be able to take a deep breath and sit down and discuss these things with people with which you disagree, and maybe you will actually learn something from them, and maybe they'll learn something from you, and then we'll actually get back into a society where the temperatures have been decreased instead of whatever it is now.
Or grow up to gain jail time. Maybe conservatives expect their kids to yearn for the mines, with them trying.
Lawmakers, new state laws are rolling back regulations on child labor. Lawmakers in Republican-led states are proposing and passing legislation to roll back child labor regulations in states like Iowa, Missouri, Ohio and Arkansas, newly passed or pending laws allow companies to hire children without work permits and allow children to work longer hours under more dangerous conditions in places like construction sites, meatpacking plants, and automobile factories. I would have to see the laws in and of itself, because if you're looking at all 4 of those states, there's probably a significant portion of those situations that could actually be acceptable. Like I think it's perfectly acceptable for children to be working in certain circumstances, like especially under their parents. Like if their parents are going to say, you can work at my company and you can get all of this experience and I can help to teach you in a one-to-one scenario under my supervision, and I can keep you safe and we can actually work on these things and you can benefit from it and learn new skills and make money for yourself and for me as well, and sort of to get you ready to be able to enter into a work life scenario, then that's actually a fantastic thing. And when you're looking at Iowa, Ohio, and Arkansas, these are places that largely have, less less industrial economies. Like the people who are in these states could actually stand to benefit significantly. Both the parents and the children could stand to benefit significantly from those children actually being able to work. Obviously there's significant limitations that I think that we can that should be had. I don't know necessarily what amount of them need to be on a governmental level. The general idea is that the more dense a society becomes, the more you expect to have government coming in and taking care of things for you. Because if it's just you and your family and a massive field, and then there's like maybe a city over there, but like you don't actually have really anybody that you need to deal with, because you are the only government over all of your land, and all of your subjects are your children, or not subjects, but constituents, I suppose, are your children. I mean, a marriage is far more like a monarchy, so I guess it wouldn't really necessarily just go makes sense to say that they're constituents, but I suppose they're more like subjects than they would be constituents. Perhaps I should just say you're citizens, but you don't actually have to govern all that much, or maybe you do. Like I don't know. I think we can trust parents to take care of their children until they don't take care of their children, and then they probably shouldn't have their children. But then we also don't have a very good system in place for foster care, and a lot of that just ends up with significantly troubled children. It just churns out troubled children, and there's a lot that we've got to fix with that system. So it's troublesome and confusing. I do believe that what the solutions are in this case, but this is I don't know. I think it's possible that a child could work on a construction site, but not in a capacity where they're actually like I don't know, maybe if they're like sort of carrying water up in certain situations, like I don't know, like I don't think that I would ever really want any child under the age of 13 working in just about any conditions necessarily, because there are more productive things that a child could do in that part of their life than to be working necessarily. And I don't know, like meatpacking, automobile, construction site, like I just don't think that would necessarily be the best place for a child. But I don't know, that's not for me to decide, not because like I don't think there could be moral problems there. I absolutely think there are moral problems there. I just don't know enough specifically about those problems to adjudicate what I think that those need to be. So I'm not going to have like a sort of a knee-jerk reaction saying, well, no child should be. It's just, well, I actually don't know what the consequences and externalities would be for allowing children in whatever these predicaments. I think that is something for local governments to figure out, and it looks like they're attempting to figure them out, and we'll see if those policies pan out in good ways or in bad ways. I don't know. I think there's actually a lot of wisdom in admitting when you don't actually know everything about a specific topic. I think there's actually this actually displays a pretty big lack of wisdom in just being like, oh, I can't believe that conservatives want this thing, and it's a complete non sequitur as well. It's just like this isn't even what he's talking about.
Their kin is way more of an immediate issue that needs correcting. Because guess what happens when a kid repeats their parents' racist statements? They harm other kids, or get in trouble and lose academic time or future opportunities, or grow up to gain jail time. Maybe conservative.
See, you talk about growing up to gain jail to get jail time. what happens when you give tax benefits or straight up subsistence off of the government dollar, of taxpayers' dollars, and you give that money specifically to single mothers? What happens? What happens then? You kind of end up with the sort of the Model Cities program. You kind of end up with a situation like Detroit. You kind of end up with massive fatherlessness in these communities. And psychologically, we know for a fact that the most important member, the most important person in a male child's life is, in a child's life is first the parent of the same sex, and second, the parent of the opposite sex. Because what does that teach you? The parent of the same sex teaches you how to behave as the sex that you are, and the parent of the opposite sex teaches you to behave as they are not, or how to deal with somebody who is different from them, or sort of the opposite gender to them, sex. Sorry, like we know that to be true, and we see the way that pans out. It's just like, all right, so if you want children to not get jail time for things that they actually didn't control, that was latent in their childhood, on a governmental level, can you tell the parents what to do? It's like, well, it depends, because there's certain things I don't think we should be allowing parents to do, absolutely, and there's externalities, abuse and whatnot, that I think can absolutely extend to something like a child labor law, or many different situations. But why would you also say, well, we need to be giving these benefits, we need to be giving these entitlements to these people? Actually, the consequences of those entitlements does lead to more jail time, because it leads to higher fatherlessness, and this is particularly a male problem, because when you don't have a father in the home that says this is the way to be a male and this is the good way to be a male, what happens? They revert to biological what's the word? Biological instincts, biological predetermination, because you actually are not adding any software to the hardware, and actually a lot of the software that you add to the hardware is bad, because you end up instituting a culture that encourages the amygdala to be the part, the most active part, and you actually enable that sort of a bad behavior, and you see it all the time in all sorts of these situations. There was the I forget his name, the case where the kid shot this other kid in the face with a shotgun and stole his car, even though they had been friends for 10 years, just so he could get into a gang initiation. And then he takes him into court, because he barely even survives this situation, takes him to court, tries to get justice for it, and the entire community that was standing behind the criminal in this case were making fun of the victim for not taking it back to the streets and dealing with it himself. It's like, this is actively a culture that doesn't like being civilized in a civilized society. Like, to tie that back into this situation, you want to actually help avoid people, you want to prevent people from having these sort of, you want to prevent children from growing up to be criminals. How about from the governmental level? Because you can't legislate what two parents do in and of themselves, and those consequences, sometimes the children of those parents are going to have to bear some of those consequences. Let's make sure that the consequences are fair and just for the individuals in every case, but let's also make sure that what the government is doing is actually allowing people to succeed and not getting in the way of people's success. Obviously that isn't what he was talking about specifically in that case. But if you look at the same, if we're going to take it from the simplified outgroup homogeneity bias collective sort of sense of like, okay, you're a progressive, you say that that parents are going like you would sooner want to condemn parents for poor behavior that they teach their children and to punish those children later on in life, than you would you would want the government to end up parenting those children instead. I don't think that bodes very well, frankly.
Kids expect their kids to yearn for the mines, with them trying to bring back dangerous child labor.
Are they trying to bring back dangerous child labor, Or is this an incredibly nuanced topic that maybe there could be good reasons for those laws to not be on the books anymore? Maybe those laws were bad. Maybe those laws weren't actually very good in those cases, and maybe the laws that they're creating now are going to be better for everybody in society, both the children, parents, I don't know, the companies who are trying to make profit and to actually be able to teach people at the same time. Everybody's profiting from the situation. Everybody's creating more value. Maybe that's actually something that's happening there. I don't know. I'm not familiar with the situation, and neither are you. You just threw it out there as a random non sequitur. That it's just like the only similarity is that this is what Republicans are doing, right-wingers, conservatives are doing in these states, and it also has to do with children. Like, what is the relation? I suppose the argument here is that you want to protect children from sexual things, so you want to you kind of overcorrect in this scenario, but you don't think that it's actually a good idea to protect them from dangerous working conditions. I think that would be a far more of a valid argument. Maybe you should actually have just said that. But you also have to understand that this is an incredibly nuanced topic that I don't know. Do you know anything about a construction site? Do you know anything about meatpacking plants? Do you know anything about automobile factories? Do you know anything about those situations that actually there could be a case where a child over the age of 13 could work in those situations without actually being subjected to potential harm and danger, under adult supervision? Like, I don't know. I'm not the one who makes the laws, and I'm not the one who's in those situations, but does it stand to reason that there could be a law that prevents children from working in a way that actually does not help the child get a better experiences and actually help prepare them for later life? Like, is there nothing valid about that whatsoever? Like, I don't understand.
I don't think it's an improvement to have child workers as con staff, guys. I don't know if they'd actually do that, but
yeah, just because there are states that are, changing their child labor laws doesn't mean that all conservatives believe that child labor laws should be completely banned outright, and we should have 5-year-olds working in sweatshops in Arkansas. And, even if there are Republican voting people in Arkansas who think that that should be the case, does that mean that those same people in Arkansas are going to furry conventions, which tend to be in Democrat cities? Like, or at least in major cities? Like, I don't understand. Like, and that they would want to, like, hire those children to be working as con staff. Like obviously they don't want that, and you say that they don't want that, but why did you say it then? Like,
it's an improvement to have child workers
say what
as
you mean.
con staff, guys. I don't know if they'd actually do that, but conservatives really seem to have that type of plan in mind, so
that is really not a good way to make a case, where you assume based off of a nuanced situation that you just non sequitur just threw out there, like, oh, well, this is a thing, and then you assume based off of your perception of that thing that's admittedly nuanced, and that neither you nor I really have much to say about it. At least I think I've got more to say about it, but you're going to take that, and then you're going to apply, well, I don't know if they'd actually do that, but I mean, it just seems like something that they would do. It's like, really? Again, very, very poor faith here. Very bad faith.
Oh, core. You're being so uncharitable. Conservatives do so well at the free market, so con for cons would be a super profitable endeavor, bringing wealth to our fandom. Ignoring furries make big bucks running.
It's like, yeah, you are being uncharitable. That's all this video is being uncharitable. Like, you actually continue to try and play both sides. You want to have your cake and eat it too. You want to say, oh yeah, conservatives are just completely worthless people, and they believe all of these things, apparently, based off of my own subjective perception of what they believe, apparently. It's just like, oh, it's news to me that's a thing that conservatives believe, because, like, as a conservative, I don't actually think that we should be having children, dying in meatpacking plants in Arkansas. It's just like, it was news to me. I don't know much about those particular laws. Maybe there could be exceptions in certain situations. I don't know much about those laws, all right? I think we can both agree we don't want children dying in those situations, but you don't think that I think that. because apparently Republicans in other states are doing these things. Like, yes, this is incredibly uncharitable. You want to say that and also say, but I am asking the question genuinely. No, this is uncharitable. And it's facetious for you to say. It's just like, oh, they're calling me uncharitable. I can't believe people would call me uncharitable in this case. It's like, actually, the fact that you would put that in as sort of a counter argument, but not actually change what you said inherently, kind of indicates that you would intentionally being uncharitable and you just don't give a shit.
The internet. Yeah, I don't want resellers filling up the dealer's den, guys. Now, to be fair, a lot of furry conservatives do seem like they'd be protectionists and keep furry artisans around.
Yes, and that's actually not conservative. Protectionism is inherently not conservative. Protectionism is inherently short-sighted. This is what you'll see on the Tucker Carlson right. This is what you'll see on that sort of the side. Trump kind of edges into this as well. This sort of protectionism, economic protectionism, this sort of all of this. Unions are cartels, and they are attempting to monopolize their own hegemony over the entire market, and that is inherently not a free market. But again, if I rewind for a bit,
furries make big bucks running the internet, or you're being so uncharitable. Conservatives do so well at the free market.
Yes,
so
we
con
do.
for cons would be a super profitable endeavor.
Yes,
bringing
it would
wealth
be.
to our fandom.
Yes,
Ignoring
it would
furries
be.
make big bucks running the internet. Yeah, I don't want resellers filling up the dealer's den, guys. Now, to be fair,
you're slurring your words. I don't want silling up the deal. I don't want resellers silling up the dealer's den. Oh, so like he's saying he doesn't want people who like scalp. He doesn't want scalping to happen effectively. Like I suppose so. I don't know what this has to do with what people were saying.
big bucks running the internet. Yeah, I don't want resellers filling up the dealer's den, guys. Now, to be fair, a lot of furry conservatives do seem like they'd be protectionists and keep furry artisans around.
Keep furry artisans around. Is that specifically saying that? Because furry artisans, like in a sense that there is like one person who is making art and they set up like their sort of thing in the dealer's den, and they've got their shirts and they've got like whatever it is they've got, like that's still capitalism. But you're saying that if it was a group of people who band together and make designs and then sell those designs on t-shirts and what have you, that's no longer okay. Like I'm sure you would still be saying that that's okay because they are actually creating what they're doing. But someone who is a reseller who just like takes a bunch of intellectual property, purchases a bunch of shirts or whatever, and then sells it for a markup price. It depends, I think, on the situation, because that is sort of a markup on the consumer in and of itself. What I would say to that is if those people show up and you know that you can get this cheaper elsewhere, then maybe you shouldn't purchase from them. Like, why is that the fault of the con for admitting them there and not the fault of the consumer for not making a better consumer choice? Like, is it's protectionism to like you're saying that you want like protectionism inherently, we want to keep the money in the laborers' hands or whatever, or we want to keep these jobs here, and sort of against the corporations or against a sort of outside, like you don't want people who aren't furries coming in and purchasing like sort of furry what is the word, merchandise, and then reselling it at a markup price. Because I mean, in that case, what we would do is we would say, all right, everybody, you know, this is the way that these people make their money. I'm just going to spread this information around because it is true information so that people can make a more informed purchasing decision about this. Or are you going to say we should ban them from the convention? Because banning people from conventions, that would be economically protectionist, and that is not conservative. So if you have apparently conservatives agreeing with you on this, then they're not really conservatives anymore. That's talking like leftists at that point. They're talking like progressives at that point. And that actually does not help to put more money in people's pockets. Because it could be the case that people who are reselling or creating storefronts, like for example, Naomi Lord, I don't know if she necessarily counts as conservative, but she creates these pins and stuff, and she does her Etsy and everything, and she manufactures things in-house, and then she also has many of these pins that she will sell to Hot Topic, and she will make money off of selling them to Hot Topic, and then Hot Topic will put a markup on it so that they can actually still, because they need to make money off of it as well. So it actually makes it into a physical retail store. Like, you don't actually think that that's a good thing. You want everything to be able to be done from Naomi Lord in-house, even though she can actually make more money. And you can also have it in person right there, and you don't have to get it shipped to you, which means you don't have to, it might actually be cheaper because of shipping costs a lot of the time for both people involved. So Naomi Lord can make a lot of money by shipping pallets of things to a dealer like a retail store like Hot Topic, and then Hot Topic can resell those things. So it's a little more expensive than if you were to buy it from Naomi Lord, but she might actually make more money, and the store makes more money, and you don't actually have to pay for shipping, or Naomi doesn't have to pay for shipping, which means that it's actually beneficial to everybody involved because it's right in your hands right there, and that's effectively why you are paying an upfront higher price. They have to charge that higher price because it takes money just to get it there in the first place, and to purchase all these from Naomi Lord, they actually have to keep their margins, and Naomi Lord has to sell it to them because it's actually better to sell in a massive pallet. It's more profitable to do that, to sell it to them, and they will distribute it to whatever stores they want to syndicate that to, effectively. So it's literally better for everybody in that case. So I don't exactly understand what the issue, like what is the deal here? Like, why do you not want that to be the case? Because there can absolutely be something beneficial there. It can just be more transparent. And if you don't think it's a good practice, then you don't have to respect that practice, and you don't have to purchase anything there. And you shouldn't purchase anything there. But just because you wouldn't purchase anything there doesn't mean that you should be making decisions that legislate that other people can't purchase things there because they have a different risk assessment than you do. That's actually tyranny. That's actually, kind of overboard. It's not actually conservative. That's not actually freedom, because you're making decisions for other people. You say, I don't like that these two people are making a consensual exchange in this situation. Like, and why does the fact that you don't like them mean that you don't like their agreement mean that you get to legislate their agreement? Why is that the case? I don't think that's very fair.
But conservatives do heavily favor capitalism due to their unironically medieval peasant-brained desire of a king to rule them through non-blood lineage of merit.
Yeah, so you don't get to say that I am genuinely asking the question when you will also call them like medieval peasant brain, whatever the hell that was. Like, you don't get to say that you are speaking in good faith and that you are actually giving anybody the benefit of the doubt when this is the way that you speak about conservatives. You don't actually understand anything about conservatism, because this is the issue. Merit is actually very important. Meritocracies are actually very good, and capitalism is not, is not a word that people like because that, if I was going to be just as uncharitable, I'd say because they're bloody stupid. Because, I can play this game as well, but I'm not going to. It's just a waste of time. Meritocracies are actually very important because it actually says that you get to earn what you work for. So you put effort into something and then you earn something. So you get a profit because you put this much effort and time in and capital in, and then you earn from that investment. And what you put into it made it so that somebody else got something out of it that they only had to trade value for, something of value in the form of currency, and something that's an agreed upon value for the thing that you've given them. And they don't have to, goodness sake, they don't have to deal with this, they don't have to do it themselves, because you created something of value for them. And they don't have to do it themselves, and you get to keep the fruits of their labor, and they get to keep the good that you traded to them. Do you not believe in that system inherently? you know, you're like, okay, yeah, I like that idea, but when you actually scale it upwards, it doesn't work anymore. Really? You don't think so? You don't think that once one person has been able to earn enough for themselves that they can actually invest that into a situation and to actually create even more value by investing even more into a situation? You get to employ people, which means that those people actually get more value for themselves because they get to put their labor in a free exchange of value. Their labor is worth a certain amount of value, and you give them a certain amount of value in exchange for their labor, and then they create something that is, you know, greater than the sum of its parts. So you create something that's of even more value, and then you can sell that thing en masse, you know, industrialized to other people, and it's something of infinitely more value than if you had ever created it before. You can scale this up practically infinitely, and it only means good things in the future. You know, the only time that it doesn't, that there might be bad consequences due to that is because, I mean, what would be an example here? Like you don't like the idea that there's going to be an upsale, like of resellers or something like that. You know, they actually wouldn't, if they didn't profit from that, they wouldn't do it. So the fact that they do it means that people are willing to buy, which means they're filling a gap in the market. And just because there are other people who aren't making well-informed purchasing decisions about those things does not mean that they are guilty for actually filling that gap in the market. The fact that the gap in the market exists a lot of the time is because those people, I don't know, they'll say a fool and his money are soon parted. If you don't believe in a meritocracy, then what do you believe in? You just believe in you know, redistributionism, that so long as everybody has the same amount of money, then we're in an equal system. Well, that actually does not scale very well whatsoever, because that means that nobody gets to keep what they've worked for. And, you know, the principle does, when you scale that, when you take everything, you say, okay, everybody, all of the billionaires, we need to take all of that money and spread it among people who didn't earn it, because that's supply side economics, demand side economics, actually, that you can create more value just by taking existing value and spreading it around equally. Inherently, this just doesn't work, because all of the people who don't have a lot of money are going to just end up making poor decisions with their money, because the reason why you don't have a lot of money is because you've made poor decisions when it comes to exchanging value for value. You've made poor purchasing decisions. You've not gotten a job in investing your time and your labor, your value, your energy, whatever it may be, into something that actually can profit more for you. The entire reason that you don't have that is that you haven't been able to make those decisions properly for yourself. And therefore you are reaping what you have sown. And if you do not sow anything, you will not reap anything. Like, so those people in the supply side, demand side, they're going to go out and they're going to spend money. This happens in the lottery all the time. They spend $1 billion on lottery tickets constantly. They scratch them all. They all come up blank. And then, you know, one person ends up winning. They win the lottery, and what do they do with it? They spend that money incredibly unwisely, don't live within their means, and then they're back destitute once again. They end up with declaring bankruptcy once again. It happens every single time. So again, you're gonna just randomly toss out, you know, capitalism inherently, because apparently you can't actually believe in a meritocracy without also being a peasant, which is bloody hilarious, because the peasantry, the entire feudalistic system, was inherently not a meritocracy. The entire feudalistic system, it's actually far more medieval for you to say that people don't get to earn, don't get to keep what they get to earn, than it is for you, than it is for somebody to say that should be the case. It's far more medieval for you to say that, because that's actually what it was. There was no meritocracy in the medieval days, because the king was the king because he was born in the right circumstance, and they ended up crowning him because he had a claim to the throne. The nobles were the nobles because they were, it's all nepotism. That's all that it ever was nepotism. You were born in the right place, in the right family. There's no class mobility. Why is there class mobility today? And there absolutely is, because if you had a better time this year than you did last year, then you have class mobility. If you made more money this year than you made last year, you have class mobility. If you saved more money, if you did better things, if you behaved better, you were able to put away more, you were able to do better for yourself. That's class mobility. That is a meritocracy. You get to keep what you earned. But that wasn't actually the case. That wasn't the case under slavery. Slavery was not a meritocracy. That wasn't the case under the aristocracy in whatever aristocratic systems that there were. That wasn't, you know, in France, under a feudalistic system, under a monarchic system. There was no, you know, there was no meritocracy. That you did not get to keep what you earned. You did not actually get the value that you wanted out of working, putting your effort, putting your value into things. You actually were not allowed to profit whatsoever. And then, you know, you end up with situations with a lot of trade where people say the birth of capitalism goes back to like the Italian city-states in Milan and what have you, that then they ended up having these guilds. And what did the guilds do? The guilds functioned as cartels where they were taking the, you don't get to work if you aren't doing what we want you to do as a laborer. That is exactly what the cartels, what these labor, what the guilds did, and that is what the unions continue to do. They just do it in the opposite direction, where it's actually not the institutional powers against them. It's just another faction that's come up supposedly to protect the rights of the people, the rights of the laborers, when actually it's not the case. It protects the rights of the laborers so long as the laborers don't actually want to go to work. Because when the laborers do want to go to work, they say, actually, you're not allowed to do that because you're engaging in free trade with your employer, and we don't like that. Like, explain to me how this is not a medieval way of thinking, please.
Be protectionist and keep furry artisans around.
Protectionism is inherently medieval. Okay, like if you wanted to call things medieval, protectionism is medieval.
Do heavily favor capitalism due to their unironically medieval.
Yeah, we favor capitalism not because of this uncharitable, ridiculous, frankly, definitionally bigoted, you know, word salad that you're about to spew out, but we favor capitalism because it's morally just and it's effective in lifting people out of poverty. There's been no greater force lifting people out of poverty worldwide than the existence of capitalism in the United States. Like, please explain to me, like the United States and the West at large, really. Please explain to me how this doesn't apply. Because if not for capitalism, the rest of the world, and if you make over $10,000, over, I believe it was $10,000 in 2018, but, you know, I don't know, however long it's been. If you make over $15,000 a year, you are in the top 1% of earners in the entire world. People in abject poverty, I currently make poverty level income. I make about $5,000 a year at my current level, and this is why I'm looking for jobs, because clearly the labor that I'm putting in is not actually giving me as much of a profit as I would prefer to have, because I want to be in a better situation than I'm at right now. So I'm looking for additional work opportunities. I've been constantly putting my nose to the grindstone with that, and eventually it's going to pay off. But, you know, this is not anybody else's fault but mine for not putting in as much effort as I can possibly do to actually monetize my skills more properly. Like, why? I don't understand how this doesn't compute, where it's like, I'm outside of the 1% and I'm in America. I'm outside of the 1% in the world, because I make only about $5,000 a year at my current level. Even if I split that across days, though, there are plenty of people who earn far less than me. Like, the amount of money that I earn on average in a day is significantly more than the average day wage or day profit of individuals in plenty of countries around the world. I don't understand how this scales at all, because apparently this is what capitalism is.
Peasant brain desire of a king to
peasant brain desire of a king to what? Like, what? That's not what the leader of a company is. The leader of a company is not a king. The leader of a company is somebody who made enough money, who put in enough effort to amass a significant amount of value. And what do they do with that value? They don't just sit around with it. They invest it. They put it back into their own company to expand their own company so they can create more, greater products, and that we can continue creating more and more and more value. That is what that inherently is. And they create more value because they can get more value out of it, and they can put that back into additional ventures to be able to create more value. You can continue, building your own way up, and then everybody gets things of more value. You can get things that are very easy to get, very cheap. But because those things are so ubiquitous now, because somebody worked so hard as to cause those things that are so ubiquitous, you want to nationalize it. This is inherently unfair. This is inherently anti-freedom, inherently morally wrong. I don't understand what the defense for this could possibly be.
Rule them through non-blood lineage of
meritocracy. Yeah, so nepotism can still absolutely happen in many cases, but a significant amount of nepotism, it really means that when you are actually being ruled over. Being ruled over means, people who are making decisions for you. Being ruled over means the government. And government nepotism is, a good reason why you shouldn't just vote for anybody because their name is Kennedy, right? Like, we don't want to see people who are in a blood lineage or whatever it may be. This isn't a non-blood lineage of being ruled over them due to merit. Nobody is ruling over me because there's no rules being made about how I live my life. I'm not being ruled over, and I'm not paying taxes to corporations. I can opt out of paying a Amazon subscription at any second with my internet connection that I pay for. I could cut off the internet connection that I pay for. I could cut off the utilities. I could cut off any of that, and I could go and I could find somebody else who wants to fill the gap in the market in a way that is better. This is a consensual exchange. This is the thing. You don't actually get to choose who you are governed by in many cases. If you are actually being ruled by a tyrant, if you are actually being ruled via blood lineage, you don't get to choose who you are ruled by. You don't get to have freedom. So who is more peasant-brained in this situation? The person who wants to grow the power of the government, or the person who wants to limit the power of the government so that the power of the people can be more respected, the rights of the people can be more protected? Because the amount of government involvement that is required is significantly lower than I think the vast majority of people. You can just bring up the Laffer curve, really. The vast majority of people on the progressive left tend to think. Like, this is just obnoxious that you think that consensually paying a subscription to Amazon is being ruled over by Jeff Bezos. Because apparently that's what meritocracy is when somebody earns enough, they get to rule over you, which is bloody nonsense. It's not the case. They get to rule over their own assets and their own business, but you can also choose not to purchase from that business. But then you say, oh no, but it's too expensive not to purchase from that business. It's like, okay, so why are you complaining then? Why are you so angry about it? It's just like, oh, they've created something that's so good that I would actively be shooting myself in the foot by not participating in a consensual exchange with them. Like, what are you on about? Like, it's not being ruled over just because the most optimal situation is a situation that you don't personally like, because you have to continue to fill the pockets of these greedy people who have actually created things that make your life significantly easier in a way that is incomprehensible to the vast majority of people around the globe. Come off it.
Merit. Depending on the conservative dealer den director, capital would be that measure of merit, which means...
Capital would be the measure of merit. Well, capital is a measure of value, and merit is exactly what you get. Value is what you get when you have merit, when you build up merit. That is what that is. Like, you get more value because you worked harder. That's what that is. Like, capital is not the measure of merit. Capital is a measure of value, and you earn value through merit. So what are you saying?
Merit. Depending on the conservative dealer den director, capital would be that measure of merit, which means resellers who can sell larger volumes on easily stockable products win, and would possibly attract the larger normie crowd via non-furry incentives.
Well, this entirely depends. But so if you don't like the way that the con is run, you don't have to go to that con. Like, that is the free market in action there. If they start to actually invite more and more normies to it because they want to actually incentivize more normies coming to it, then it actually becomes more about just a convention than it becomes about a particular interest of whatever the particular group of people that you're trying to cater to is, in this case being furries. I don't think this actually pans out very well in the long run, because when you look at something like Comic-Con or like FanX or whatever, that these conventions were originally, I mean, that's why they changed it, it was Comic-Con, and then they were like, actually we want to sort of branch out to more than simply just comic book characters in particular. And what do you get? Well, you get a lot of people who are anime, and that's tangential, and you get a lot of people who are I don't know, Star Wars or film fans or what have you, and they're cosplaying in those and all of that. But you know, you get the Lord of the Rings, and then you end up inviting a lot of actors and animators or whomever. You end up getting loads of that coming in. Is that worse in and of itself? I wouldn't really say so, because then you actually get to expand your horizons, because it's a larger tent for everybody. Do you want a smaller tent? Well, you can absolutely create a smaller tent, but you're also going to probably be able to bump into plenty of people who exist under that tent. There are furries who come to FanX. There's always at least one who comes over, and they're in a full suit, partial suit. They're always going to be there, because they see that there are other people who are dressing up as things that they are self-expressing themselves, and it's like, okay, well, this is kind of tangential to do what I want to do in suiting, so I'm going to go and express myself in a similar way. And so they show up, and it's like, is that a bad thing? No, well, no. Like, you know, there are going to be some people who snicker, and it's like, well, okay, but we're surrounded by, I saw people who were dressed up as that dude with like the pig head or whatever from that anime, and they smelled like like the way that I see it, like I saw someone being like, you know, Tinkerbell isn't 210 pounds. Maybe you should go for some accuracy, or whatever the bloody, you know, the case was being made for that. And I was just like, I mean, yeah, if you're going for accuracy, but if you're going just for a general, like, I want to kind of look like this character, then it's not like that's actually like a bad thing necessarily. But then at the same time, you would end up with like these, you know, these fat kids who dressed up as this character who is like extremely lean and cut, and he's got like abs and everything, and they're wearing like the pig head or whatever he's got. I don't even know what character he's from. Is it like Jujutsu Kaisen character or something? That's not even the problem. The problem is that they smell like shit. Like, please, deodorant. I've got some right here. Arm & Hammer, Ultra Max, fresh. Like, please, apply some of this. Showers, it's a thing. Bacteria kind of accumulates on the body, makes you stink. And I don't want to smell that in public. I also don't want to really see your tummy rolls. No offense to this guy, though.
More likely to push out furries from the furries dealer's den.
So, but that's kind of the question, though. Because inherently when things get bigger, they may get more like elitist, perhaps, or they may get more corporatist, perhaps. You are perfectly free to not attend those situations. You are perfectly free to say, well, there's actually too much of this in the dealer's den, so I'm kind of sick of it. But what does that also do? That also actually prevents individual artists and artisans and whatnot from actually creating their own trades, whereas, you know, you can actually hire multiple people and say, well, we're going to start manufacturing more merchandise with my characters on it that I drew, or I'm going to combine the skills with other people, and maybe I'm going to create an IP, maybe I'm going to create an animation studio, maybe I'm going to do these things, and I'm going to promote it at a con. Like, you end up actually not being able to do that because you don't like it when multiple people get together and have a consensual exchange of value. You don't like that because you want change to be, you like it when it's democratized and it's individuals, but you want to prevent individuals from actually growing up beyond being individuals and actually creating more value for them. And what does that do? That actually makes it so that the things that you can get, the amount of things that you can get, and the cost that can be had with those things is going to be higher. And so you would actually see it be better for everybody if there was cases where that could happen. Investors could come in, people could be, you know, attempting to create their own companies, but like you would see it would be cheap. And this is what happens like every single time that you try to small companies generally don't have the value possible to you know, hire enough people or to invest enough in multiple things to be able to create things with enough margins to be able to have low prices. Low prices are generally the what's the word? They're generally the consequence of good behavior, what is the word? Of having enough value in a particular, invested into the situation, into the company, to be able to actually bring those at a low price. And actually that's what capitalism does, is it actually creates a race to the bottom when it comes to prices, where you aren't actually stipulating that these people can't actually have an exchange of value because you inherently just hate employment, apparently. Like, no, it's actually, and that's what economic protectionism is inherently, is that when two people come together and one person exchanges something of value for something of value, one of those people have lost rather than both of them winning. Like, no, just because one person has profited off of that situation does not mean that they won and the other person lost. And just because that one person paid more money than it costed to actually create the thing does not mean that that person lost either. It means that both of them won, because now you get something that wouldn't exist if that person didn't sell it, and that person got something that wouldn't exist if you didn't buy it. Both of you win in that case. You've created more value just by having that transaction. So why do you want to prevent people from having those transactions? Protectionism is inherently not conservative. So when you say conservatives are agreeing with you about this, they're actually being less faithful to conservatism than conservatives generally are.
No, Core. You need to pursue higher moral issues. You need to look into putting God back into cons.
Well, no, I don't think that needs to happen. I don't. That's not the purpose of the con. The purpose of the con is to actually have a bunch of people who can come and do business with each other and discuss and self-express and show off and I don't know, just perform and all of these things. Like, you know, that's the purpose of the con. The purpose of the con is not necessarily to, like, bring God into it. Like, that is, you know, as a libertarian, I don't see how that is something that needs to happen or is remotely interesting to anybody in this case. Where, I don't know, maybe you could have a panel where multiple furry creators talk about religion. Like, maybe there could be a situation where that could be perfectly acceptable and an interesting thing to be involved with. Or maybe they can all talk about controversial issues on a panel, or you could have sort of a change my mind setup where somebody sets up and they film and whatnot, and they just bring in random furries and they actually discuss with them all sorts of issues and whatnot. Like, I don't know, like, but does that have to be specifically about God? Do we have to take any sort of theocratic sense where it's like, well, religiously I believe these things, so therefore we actually should be involving these things into our con from a policy standpoint? I don't actually think that that's the best way to go about it, because you're definitely not going to be making as much money that way. But I mean, everybody to a certain degree is going to advance their careers, their lives, their interests into cons or into whatever they are investing in. They're not going to invest into something that doesn't actually fit into their moral view of the universe. And so there's going to be, I don't know, if there was like a Christian investor or a Christian leader of a corporation of some kind, that they wanted to involve certain rules because they believe that to be sort of morally just, and consequentially they thought that was a decent enough trade-off to say, okay, I'm not going to trade my morals for more money because I don't want to accept people into the con who do XYZ. Like, that could be something, I suppose. But I'm not a theocrat. I don't think that we should be involving. I think policy decisions should be made on a secular level, and we should have secular discussions about those, and that we should actually relegate we should relegate religion to the motivations behind a lot of the discussions we're having, but we should be able to actually objectively have the discussion. And the vast majority of conservatives who have the just the right wing, as you could say, because we're between libertarian right and authoritarian right. You know, I think the authoritarian right inherently becomes less about equal outcome, or maybe not. I don't know. People who are on the right, sort of a center right, would certainly say that no, I don't think that God should be the crux of the decisions of, you know, a lot of my morality is derived from my religion, for example, but I don't think that that necessarily should be read into every single aspect of my what's the word, of my policy, in either politically or when it comes to the way that the business should be run, or the way that the businesses should be, that businesses that I don't even own should be run. It's just like, or which, I don't know, if somebody wants a con that has certain rules that are more or less theocratic, then I don't know, they could, that's a gap in the market, I suppose. Or if they want to discuss God in the context of being a furry, then I don't know, I suppose that's a gap in the market for some people, maybe. I can't really imagine why that's even a relevant thing to be saying in this situation. So it's like, I don't know. He's probably going to say something I agree with in response to that.
Ignoring that you can submit and obtain Christian meetup panels at some major cons, or just set up your own personal prayer meetup anyway. Furry is global, so there can be people who believe in gods with an S, or have no affiliation to theistic beliefs at all. So by limiting the con to one religion, that just gets rid of an important space for different people, which makes a worse experience for those people who make the things furries want to.
Yeah, that would actually be creating a massive gap in the market, and that's actually the reason why it's not about that. There's a significant amount of markets that exist in this state. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's like one thing that I agree with in this entire video so far.
To see, meaning the cons experience degrades even more over time.
Yep.
Not great. A conservative could just be arguing some major cons don't let religious panels go through, and that we need more religious freedom.
Yeah.
Until there's a Church of Satanist panel that they spot. Right? At every point.
No, I mean, I don't know. I suppose it depends on what they're calling for, but that would also apply to if there was a religious panel of whatever kind. I don't know. I'm all for a free market of ideas. I'm all for engaging in the free exchange of ideas. And you know, if we're gonna have you know, an evangelist furry, a Satanist furry, an atheist furry, an agnostic furry, and a Jewish furry, and an Islamic furry, and I suppose that would be Muslim furry. Islamic more describes like an Islamic country, but like a Muslim furry, whatever it is. I'm just putting a mental image in my head of what that would look like. That actually sounds like the beginning of a joke, honestly. But like, you know, the furry rabbi, a rabbi, a priest, and a friggin' monk walk into a furry convention and sit down at the panel. That'd be great, honestly. That could be wildly entertaining and actually very enlightening if you could get reasonable people from all of those different perspectives, or maybe unreasonable people from all of those perspectives, to be able to discuss in a civil manner, at least. So long as it's a civil manner, maybe it can be entertaining, but so long as they're not like shouting over each other, then that could maybe even they are shouting over each other. I don't know. So long as there's something of value that is everybody is bringing to the table, and that you know, the entire crowd is kind of responding to. Like, I don't really see much of an issue with everybody showing up and being able to have those discussions. I don't know, so long as they're all drinking enough water and making sure that they're not overheating in their suits and whatnot. Like, you know, not that everybody is a suitor necessarily. People who are not suitors are absolutely welcome at cons, and I wouldn't gatekeep against that. And I wouldn't gatekeep against conservatives. I wouldn't gatekeep against non-conservatives. I wouldn't really want to gatekeep against anybody, okay? Like, that's my entire thing. I don't think that we should be banning Satanists from being able to speak, because they have the right to speak. Until you call for violence, then you don't. Then everything is within. And you know, even then, you can absolutely condemn things that people say, but you know, there are things that are within and without the Overton window, and you know, that'll shift as time goes on. But like, you know, I'm perfectly good with that sort of being the case, and I don't think it's fair to assume that conservatives actually don't want Satanists to be able to speak, or that, you know, the Satanist panel should not be able to, because I don't know, I believe far more in the concepts of the right to freedom of speech than I believe in the right. Then I believe in theocracy, because I don't want to pick and choose who gets to speak and who gets to not speak. Does that mean that I necessarily have to intentionally platform people who say things that I disagree with? It depends, but I do believe that I would defend to the death of everybody's right to speak, including this fellow, including Satanists, including people who I disagree with vehemently, so long as they're not like actively calling for violence, because that actually is not speech anymore. That is an incitement, and so that doesn't really fit within the acceptable realm of discourse. But yeah, like this is part of the entire reason that I have a podcast in the first place, is because I enjoy discussions. I enjoy logical discussions and discourse, and the free market, free exchange of ideas, and I don't want people who have ideas that are not harmful to, or at least that are debatable, to not have those debates. I want people to be having those debates so that people can make a decision, you know, a rational decision based off of the information that they've got. I want people to be able to make those risk assessments about their beliefs. And I don't want people to be censored one way or the other, regardless of whether or not that actually matches up with my principles. You know, I'm still going to promote my principles, but I can't expect my principles to be able to be promoted by me or others who think like me, if I also say people who disagree with my principles don't get to promote theirs either. If I believe in my principles and I believe that my principles will win out, then I don't need any sort of totalitarian control to come in. So actually, this is more of a question that I would pose to people of his ilk. Do you think that freedom of speech is absolute, or do you think that when it comes to certain, would you like, as I would like, to have a, you know, Satanist, agnostic, atheist, Christian, Muslim, furry panel to be allowed into a con, and to equally allow all of those people to speak until they say something that is, you know, wildly out of line? Obviously that line is going to be in a different place depending on all of those people, where, I don't know, maybe if one person believes in something that is, you know, extremely conservative, and one person believes in something that's, whatever it may be, that line might be very debatable. But so long as it is not calling actively for violence, perhaps, would we agree that we would both want that type of thing to happen? I don't want to censor the conservative, and I don't want to censor the Satanist until one or the other says something that actively puts, you know, that is actually an act of incitement to violence, or where they, or I don't know, something out of, just severely out of pocket, I suppose, and that's not a standard necessarily, and that's a describable standard, because I don't want to necessarily say that nobody should ever be ousted, because in some cases I think it's absolutely perfectly fine to condemn people and to say, actually, I'm not going to associate with those people anymore, because I mean, this is something that that the right has done with plenty of people. Milo Yiannopoulos, as an individual, with his you know, he's just a rhetorician, a provocateur, comedian to a certain sense, someone who engaged in debates and whatnot, has ended up kind of going over the deep end with a lot of the things he was saying, and everybody was saying on the right that, hey, I actually don't associate with that anymore. That's not really something that I agree with. Don't really accept that as the case. That's a little bit too far for me, and I'm not going to associate with that person anymore. You know, that's kind of different than I don't know. It depends. So that there's a difference between a reasonable sense of sort of rejecting the premise of somebody's arguments without rejecting the person in and of themselves, perhaps. But I don't know exactly where to draw that line without a specific situation, and I'm all for forgiveness in many cases. So I wouldn't want to say that I wouldn't necessarily ban people based off of what they say I just want the standard to be consistent. So that would be my question: is it like, when would you say that the Christian is out of line versus when the Satanist is out of line? Because at that point, I do think that could be very indicative of what your ideological soft spot is. That you might actually have a soft spot for the Satanist, and you are actually not going to be you're going to bend your principles to the whims of the Satanist in favor of the Satanist and against the conservative, against the Christian rather. When does the Christian get banned? When does the Satanist get banned? And is that actually a consistent line that you've drawn? Because I think the most consistent line that we should be drawing is just when people actually make active calls to violence that are illegal, where it's like, actually, you've just done something illegal at my con, and I'm not going to actually allow somebody who does that to come back. I think that should be, and same thing on Twitter, same thing on YouTube, same thing on whatever platforms that they've got, is that, you know, I don't think that they should be allowing people, when that is the case, to do it, because that's actually free speech. But at the same time, private companies can decide, you know, corporations are just simply groups of people, and if you can tell a corporation who they do or do not get to associate with, you also can tell individuals who they do and do not get to associate with, and that is inherently tyrannical and not very fair at all. And so I don't want that to sort of be the case. So I think we should kind of look at it as, so long as people are being fair and consistent with the rules that they set, then they should be able to set those rules and of engagement. But I do think that freedom of association, I wish that freedom of association was one of the early amendments to the Constitution. Congress shall make no law, as I say. But anyhow,
conservatives don't want to improve a convention. They just don't want people to live their lives unless it's according to their very specific specimen.
This is rich. This is rich. No. I would love to improve a convention, and I do think that actually allowing people on these panels, and obviously this comes as somebody who's actually never been a con goer, so I'm not about to say that I'm not about to say that I know everything about this situation, that I actually have any sort of a vested interest in this situation. Like, I'm not going to say specifically to free-for-all or something like that, that convention in particular should allow this type of thing. So, well, that's not my decision to make. I don't run the convention, and I'm also not a consumer of that service, so I'm not going to say what they should or should not do, because that's actually, there's nothing sort of that involves me in that situation. But what I would say is that if I were running my own con, and I think generally if they want to be successful, then cons should actually not be trying to alienate conservatives, and that actually there could be much to gain from having a panel such as I've described, where there are you know, heterogeneous voices being able to have a discussion with each other about a variety of things. I think that could be remarkably productive, and I don't think we should be reactionary to people who disagree with us. I think we should actually be just listening to people who disagree and coming to the table assuming that they believe what they believe for legitimate reasons, and that they just have a different risk assessment. But we both want good things to happen. The assessment's just different. You know, we want to be able to be charitable to each other. So, like that's exactly what I'm getting at. That's what I believe. I think the vast majority of conservatives believe that as well. I'm not going to speak for other people, but that's what conservatism means to me, in the very least. That's my sort of a definition as it applies to this case. I think it's incredibly rich because the vast majority of people on the left, the progressive left, progressivism, wokeism, whatever you want to call it, is far more theocratic, because there's actually no semblance of freedom sort of within the idea that is prescribed, where these are the set of ideas that we want to propagate, and we don't like it when other people don't want to participate in a situation where we have all of these ideals that we propagate. And if you disagree, we're going to castigate you. You know, if you're a Christian and you believe that, or if you're not a Christian, you just simply believe that there's that we're a sexually dimorphic species, and that male and female are not inherently interchangeable categories, and that Like, that's hateful, and you're not allowed to say that anymore, and I'm going to beat you out of my out of the realm of acceptable discourse. Like, that is inherently unfair, and inherently is going to not make people think the way that you think. Like, you're not convincing anybody by doing that. But this is rich. This is hypocrisy. Like, it's just like, why can't you at least be honest that that's also what you do? Like, why can't you at least be honest about that? Because you don't care about free speech. You don't actually have that as a value. You don't care about free speech because you don't think that you want, and you don't care about freedom of association. You don't like it when conservatives come to a con and they engage in free and open discussions with people, or engage in free exchange with people. You don't like it when they do that because you don't like them, because you have a definitionally bigoted perspective on what their values are, and you don't like the values that you think they have, but they don't. Like, you've created a monster in your own imagination, and then fit everybody into that box and rejected everybody who doesn't fit into that box out of the box. And then, like, what do you think you are actually achieving with this? Like, it's just stupid.
They just don't want people to live their lives unless it's according to their very specific specifications.
That's your standard. You want to control. You want to control. You don't like it when people actually engage in free discussions with people. That's why you hate Twitter. That's why you don't like Twitter anymore. It's because now the right gets to have free and open discussions with people. And when you engage in free and open discussions with people, your ideas are far more likely to actually stand the test of people's reason. And, just because people can't actually accept what you believe is that a them problem for being like too stupid to believe what you believe, or is that a you problem for not being able to pitch it properly to them? You want to control. Like this is such a massive projection. You don't actually care about freedom. Because people who disagree with you don't think deserve the freedom to do things that you disagree with. That is actually theocracy. And I'm not a theocrat. I don't want to be regulating other people based off of inherently, like if you don't read the Bible, like I don't want the state to be like controlling people because they aren't part of my faith, because I don't think that the state gets to choose that for other people. I don't think authority gets to choose for other people what they get to believe in. I don't think they get to choose that until it actually ends up causing actual externalities and people's rights actually are being violated due to that. Then that's the only point that they get to step in. But if there's a choice for that, then you're actually violating the rights of others for the sake of other people. You are creating a favoritism in the way that you do that. You don't actually care about control. You don't care about the government boot. You don't care about authoritarian policies in, from a corporation, from a whatever. You don't care about any of that. You just don't like it when people you disagree with use the power. You want to have the ring of power. You don't want the people that you dislike to have the ring of power. And that's it. You want control. That's what it is. I don't want to control anybody until those people actually require control. Where do I draw that line? When they're creating externalities, where they're actually violating the rights of other people. You think that the government should be stepping in when people bloody don't have, when they don't agree with you, and that's actually theocracy. You don't actually care. and this is silly, all right? You need to be able to actually compartmentalize these things. And crap, I've gone over 2 hours and now I've got to go, which is a little bit obnoxious, but maybe I'll be able to finish this tomorrow, because I've only got like 1 minute left. It's just, this is the concept that you get at it. It takes a whole lot longer to actually debunk a single stupid statement than it takes to actually say the stupid statement in and of itself. There's a concept of this like inflation of BS, where it's like, well, if you just say capitalism bad, then it kind of takes a long time to actually discuss why that is false, because you just said 2 words and now I actually have to define capitalism, and I have to actually define all of the consequences due to it. It's like, it actually takes a lot longer to parse these things out than it just says, than it takes for you to just be like, yeah, this is what I believe. I don't like capitalism. I don't like people who disagree with me. Yeah, I'm a hypocrite about everything that I say. I don't have standards. The standards are just entirely, they just entirely bend to my whim at every single second. Bloody ridiculous. All right, we'll be seeing you later. Maybe I'll finish this. Maybe I'll be able to finish this. I don't know if it's only going to take like 15 minutes, but whatever. It's fine.